Hello everyone, this is part 12 of What If Naruto Was the Blue Uchiha, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
7:11 p.m. Tsuki Town. Hot water country. Bare feet softly padded the grimy dungeon floor, scarcely making a sound in spite of the deathly silence of the seemingly above-ground unpopulated containment facility, save for one recent resident dumped there by people she once considered her closest comrades. The owner of the shoeless feet plodded past rusted cages and vacant cells, biting down on the blunted needles she had used to pick the corroded locks of her cell. Yugao was offended that her captors hadn't even used a seal to fortify the cell's lock, believing that such a pitiful thing would keep her in place for however long they wanted her. The former Anbu kept her stance low and maintained a steady stride, breathing tightly. The cuts on her torso and shins itched. So that the end products of Kakashi's Mangekyo illusion weren't aggravated, she had rolled up her ninja pants up halfway up her shin and fully unzipped her dark black ops flak jacket, exposing her featureless black long-sleeved half shirt and the deep slashes littering her toned abdomen. Yugao gnashed the needles in her pursed lips, tucked to the left side of her mouth like silver-colored toothpicks. She hurt. Her wince died before it could escape her and she stopped at the bottom of a long flight of stairs leading downwards, winding into a cluster of seemingly infinite blackness. The former wearer of the cat Anbu mask had a vague mental map of the upper level of the imprisonment facility. It consisted of some 30 cells of varying states of ruin, lined face to face and separated by a walkway of about 10 feet wide that went to the stairs going downstairs, as if the whole building was one straight line that had at some point been inescapable and impenetrable. The tiny windows were barred by iron rods about as thick as her wrist, and the dirty, unattended windows looked to be made from a blast-proof material. She was positive the place only had a single story. The facility was bathed in darkness, illuminated briefly by the roving lights of sentry buildings and shortly resounding with the distant sounds of faceless celebration. The place smelled strongly of iron and human despair, but, as she prepared herself to creep down the stairs in hopes of finding freedom, she spotted an old, dirty poster pasted on the wall, probably to provide some sort of false hope in the hearts and souls of the inmates. Visit Tsuki, the city of sounds and home of otherworldly pleasures. And a scantily dressed hostess stood before a yellow-red sky of fireworks with her right hand perched on her hip, smiling leeringly at Yugao. Tsuki, the purple-haired swordswoman, muttered in her head with a hesitant swallow, tearing her eyes from the dingy poster and looking down at the mass of blackness before her in the form of the stairs she was to amble down to anticipative freedom. Her chakra was all over the place, still affected by the lingering presence of Kakashi's ocular genjutsu, so that cancelled the option of smashing the windows and leaping out of the facility from there. Her katana was nowhere to be seen and she had been stripped of all her weapons. The pale-eyed crow carefully watched her as she clenched her fists, hard enough for her knuckles to pop, and she wriggled her toes. The last thing she did was tie her purple hair up into a messy ponytail, before she steadily crept down the stairs. Ooh. Moments after Yugao's kidnapping. Minato's mindscape. The other half of Blue's soul screwed his lips to the side and his muscled arms toughened as he crossed them, turning his closed eyes at the bland-faced Yondaime. You hit me where it hurts, Minato. The chains attached to his limbs rankled at the baleful pulse of dark chakra, making his cage groan as it stretched outwards. The shackles tightened, but he didn't consider the pain all that much, nor did he think much of how the fourth Hokage stood strong against the demonic ebb of his chakra from outside the cage. Of all the people, the blonde cage ignored the harsh tingle on his face and he smirked widely. That thing you pulled in Ichiraku Ramen, the vision of you ruining me, I'm willing to forget what you've done. You go on and on and on about my weapons and my schematics, I'm getting tired of hearing this. The sealing paper on his cage fizzled and the Fuinjutsu prodigy hastily drew 10 more restrictors, containing the violent swirl of chakra occurring inside the cage. The points of contact for the chains reddened and Blue clenched his teeth, frustrated. Let me tell you what will happen once Kakashi and Tenzo ambush Yugao. His lips stretched into a wide grin, revealing rows and rows of serrated teeth. Tenzo will be put in such a state that he would linger between the realms of the living and dead for an indefinite period of time, only having his long-suffering soul anchored to his body by his Kekai Genkai. And Kakashi, Yugao would put him in critical condition, forcing him to seek the nearest medic. She's captured, dumbass. Blue scoffed, stating, but I'm right. Minato's jaw clenched and he redrew more limiters. You wanted a reaction from me. Blue opened his unseeing white eyes, raising an eyebrow. To swing in and save her, then you flash in and somehow kill me. The black blonde Uchiha soul shook his head. It's hard fighting someone that can literally read your thoughts. Minato chuckled. You see what I want you to see, Naruto. The half-soul hummed, furrowing his brow. We students of Jiraiya are a lot closer than you think. The man stepped back with his arms open, beaming. I've got friends outside of Konoha like you won't even believe. The mental projection of the Yondaime dispersed into a flurry of leaves, bringing him back to the waking world and leaving the blind soul sealed in his person to perch his chin between his pointer and middle finger. He droned thoughtfully. The dying god and his origami angel. Ooh. With Yugao. At the bottom of the stairs, Yugao skidded to a stop and whirled behind a corner, peeking around briefly and spying a woman with lavender-colored hair and dark brown eyes, wearing a black with red cloud-designed cloak that had a high collar hiding her purple-painted lips and reaching just about the middle of her shins. Her feet were clad in a pair of black sandals and her toes were painted equally dark, white shin guards and sporting a hidden rain hat that was crossed out with one clean slice. Her side profile casually walked back and forth in front of the entrance of the dungeon. Her expression was plain and empty and the origami rose tucked at the top of her purple hair quivered ever so mutely with each muffled step. Conan stopped and her luminously pale face turned in her direction. Yugao hastily took cover around the corner, calming herself. Who the hell is she? Her mind echoed with that question, flicking for any other exit point. The place was now just a quaint lobby and a set of stairs leading into the cells, nothing much to the whole building but that. Yugao's face twisted and she wondered. She could be a poser. Instinct, though, warned her not to take such a person lightly. For someone to claim to be from the same village as the dead immediate former Imekage, Hanzo of the Salamander, and the epicenter of the Second Shinobi War, the person wasn't to be trifled with. Wanting to gather more visual clues on the paper origami-wearing lady, Yugao glanced around the corner. Her eyes widened as the mysterious woman stood not 4 inches from her, peering down at her from her nose and a chillingly empty gaze sweeping over the former Konoha Junin. Her first close-up opinion of her was that the missing ninja was tall. Precisely half a head taller. The lady hadn't even made a single sound as she approached, muffling her chakra into bare non-existence and finding a way to make the revolving shadows cast from the lights of the sentry post streaming through the entrance unimportant. The woman from teemed lightly, an almost musical sound to Yugao. Yugao Azuki. Her airy, song-like voice very nearly lulled the cat lover to sleep. Thankfully, she had her wits about her. Yugao craned her neck back, looking deep into the cool pools of brownness that were the angel of Am's eyes, and spat the 2 needles in her mouth at her. The smoke bomb seals etched on each needle burst on contact with Conan's unmoving chin. The former Konoha black operative surged past the other purple-haired lady and burst out of the entrance in a blur of remarkable speed, especially for one that still suffered from a dissonance in her chakra core caused by remnants of Kakashi's illusion. Conan mentally applauded the younger woman's inventiveness and tenacity. Before her body broke up into sheets of paper, warping after the fleeing kidnap victim. I love a good chase. The angel of Am breathed out calmly, gracing Yugao's back with an invisible smile. Entertain me until the blue Uchiha arrives. Ooh. 4th District. Hanbai City. Fire Country. On the other side of the continent, Blue rubbed his temples with the fingers of his right hand and adjusting Amaki's limp weight on his other shoulder. He was under a street lamp, hefting the unconscious scientist and tilting his head downwards, squinting unseeingly at the ground. The residential building Yugito was raiding was alight with alarms, blaring for all the city to hear, but that was the point. The Jinchuriki of the Nibi no Nekomata was gathering incriminating documents, photos, videos and samples of the Yondaime's criminality. This place that looked like a normal family home was Amaki's base in Fire Country, where he received the Yondaime's funding and could hunker down for the next few months if the heat on him was too much, trusting that the blonde cage would throw off his scent and send anyone on his back either on a wild goose chase or to the graves. It was a route base, the very last Danzo could have fled to, and the Warhawk's shinobi had been charged to protect and provide for Amaki whenever Gato was unable to, which was surprisingly frequent. The Hokage was paying the wanted scientist to research and experiment into replicating and evolving Kekai Genkai, piling dead bodies upon dead bodies to achieve this dream of prospective fame. Once Amaki made a breakthrough, Minato intended to sell the laboratory-made bloodlines to fetch a hefty profit. Money and fame were the Hokage's greatest motivators, as well as his envy of anyone equal or above him. Naruto, Blue, Uchiha. Minato didn't have it easy growing up, facing abandonment, neglect and abuse. Much like Naruto, though the Uchiha wasn't sure what specific catalyst shaped the Hokage into what he was presently. That thought process was for later. Now, he wondered what to do about Yugao. He hadn't foreseen the dying god and his origami angel entering the field this soon. It was a miscalculation on his part. Minato had one-upped him. He shook his head. Not now. Not for long. Orochi. The dark-skinned Sannin came to his side, holding a briefcase in her left hand and a phone ready in her right. Do you have anyone in Zuki? The corners of the woman's lips crept up into a twisted, sinister smirk. Of course I do, Naruto. The man exhaled at the subtle hint on who exactly was presently staying in Zuki in her mistress's stead, serving as the temporary part-time mob doctor for the Iron Yakuza. He shivered. In a bid to both distract himself and put his mind to better use, his brain then made some blazing recalculations and alterations to his plans, accommodating not just the Rinnegan god and the Angel of Am, but also a whole host of other variables that intentionally or unintentionally stood between him and his goal of tearing down Minato's existence. He dropped Amaki's unconscious body and Isaribi wasted no time vengefully tearing into it, ripping the man limb from limb with her augmented physical strength and other Kaima abilities cursed upon her by the very man she was murdering. The girl finally had her revenge, as morbid and bloody as it was. The underworld and the snake sage went to do their own things. Orochimaru made a call. Kabuto Yakushi answered. Blue had a few messages of his own to send. Ooh. Core. Yugao's head snapped up the moonless night sky, leaping and bounding from branch to branch. A branch snapped underneath her and she tucked into a roll a split second before hitting the hard ground, feeling the dried grass prick into the back of her neck and the strong rustle of leaves as a tornado of paper sliced the tree directly behind her to ribbons, lowering her head and taking a hard right as the same storm of paper tore through the spot on the forest floor she had landed on. A drop of sweat slid down the side of her face as the sheets of paper stilled in the air, hovering close together and forming the other purple-haired woman's face, broken in places by errant pieces of paper seemingly escaping her expressionless visage. Yugao was in a low stance, her hands on the ground and her feet apart at the ready, like a cat that was mere moments from pouncing. Poor girl. Conan cooed emotionlessly, her dull brown eyes blinking slowly as she watched the former Konoha black operative pant tightly through her teeth, hissing subtly at the almost omnipotent paper angel. You need rest, do you not? Back off, lady. Yugao spat, pelting to her left and merging her fingers, blitzing through a set of hand seals. Come on Chakra, don't fail me now. She finished the chain of hand seals just as a pair of arms gently embraced her from behind. Puff. Yugao's twitchy body switch seal took them high into the sky, dead center inside a murder of crows. Core. The former Anbu ripped her arms apart, forcing the arms hugging her from behind off, and she flipped around in midair. She wondered how she had gotten into the sky when she was targeting a branch some yards from her former location, but a moment after her confusion and before she lifted her forearms to her face to block a jab to her chin from her pursuer, she saw that some of the crows carried with them sticks and branches in their claws. What the? Descending while still crowded by the crows, Yugao batted away another jab to her face with her right palm, tensed the muscles of her abdomen in anticipation of a gut punch and grunting when instead she received a palm strike to her chest, rolling sideways with the blow and returning a backhand strike to Conan's shoulder. The woman partly broke up into paper, lessening the impact of the blow, and controlling the sheets to instantly cut the distance between herself and her target. A cloud of viscously coring blackness swarmed Yugao at the same time, embracing and shading her from view. Conan backtracked in the air, gritting her teeth in frustration. Her hands came up to her side, palms facing down to the earth probably hundreds of miles below them. The angel swiped her palms at the warbling, squawking blackness of flapping wings and snapping beaks and paper shuriken spun from her palms, clanging against the murder of crows covering Yugao, eliciting sparks of red-white on contact and resulting in an infuriated increase in the savage calls not just the crows not she was attacking but all of the black birds around her. Core, ca core. Core, 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 core. The murder dispersed completely and Conan was alone, hovering in the sky and looking around, bewildered. What just happened? She fingered her Akatsuki ring and contemplated what to do. Finally, she decided that she wasn't going to leave Zuki until either Yugao was recaptured or Blue was dead. Paper clone technique. Roughly 10 clones separated from Conan's body, flying in different directions and scouring Zuki for the vanished swordswoman. Meanwhile, directly below the original Conan, Yugao crouched down inside a bush and warily cast her gaze on the newly arrived girl that had her bespectacled gaze turned to the sky. The girl had silver hair styled into a Heim cut, a roundish face that almost deceived the purple-haired lady of her age, a small, button nose and pouty lips devoid of lipstick. She was wearing a pair of large, reflective glasses and around her forehead was the hatake for hidden chill. The older Kunoichi couldn't really figure out what she was wearing, aside from a dusky, shadowy full-body suit and a dark blue flak jacket with dark blue boots. Who are you? Yugao asked sharply, not sure if she was in the state to defend herself in such close quarters. It was the entire reason she was fleeing from the missing ninja. My mistress tells me you are one of my love's special people. The X-Leaf ninja's whole aura lit up at the statement, before she winced. You're Kabuto. The bespectacled girl beamed, still staring up at Conan's unmoving form high in the sky. I see my love has mentioned me before. Yugao hesitantly hummed. Once or twice. She couldn't say that Naruto had called her a nutjob each and every time he came back to Konoha from Chill. Kabuto had been an Iwa orphan the blue Uchiha had rescued years back and she was the more zealous of the pack in Chill that felt deeply indebted to him. Kabuto blushed deeply and her hands hid her red cheeks, facing Yugao with her glasses fogged up and steam billowing from her cheeks. I'm so happy. My love speaks of me to his friends. She stared into nothingness, wistfully whispering and lustfully licking her lips. My love. Yugao sweet dropped. Do you have a blade on you? Any kind is fine. Even a kunai will do. Kabuto unsealed a sheathed katana from a large scroll strapped to her lower back, an accessory the other woman was just noticing, and wordlessly handed it to her new comrade, turning her head up and narrowing her eyes at how Conan hadn't moved from her spot in the sky. Just hovering there, motionlessly, silently. Yugao's surprise and elation didn't register much in Kabuto's focus on Yugao's pursuer. My sword. She pulled out the blade a little from its sheath, noting that even though there were still splotches of blood on it, the blade was very much hers. The handle was lavender in color with the words, Naya, etched into the steel-forged butt. The blade was made from a mysterious metal from Hidden Star, carved out of Hoshigaku's precious pink meteorite and stolen by Yugao herself in youth. It was a dull shade of pink with a murky white blade's edge, pulsing vaguely with life as soon as the cat lover curled her fingers around the purple handle. Close to the square guard, the woman had carved her initials and along the length of the blade she had engraved the 8 phases of the moon, from new moon to full moon. This was her 13th katana, the only one she made with her own hands and the last sword she had ever possessed, made when she was somewhere between 15-16. Her old swords couldn't even dream of measuring up to her current blade, literally and figuratively. Yugao murmured the name she assigned to her weapon and it pulsed lowly, affirmatively. Lu Naya. She thought she would never see her precious sword again, asking Kabuto in a relieved voice. Where did you get her? Kakashi Hatake pawned it off to the Iron Yakuza boss so I could heal him and his half-dead friend, Yamato Tenzo. The bodysuit-wearing scientist's apprentice replied with deadpan honesty. Apparently you have a bounty in the Iron Yakuza. Also apparently, that sword is made from the Hoshi meteorite. The silver-haired scientist's apprentice rolled her wrist flippantly. It's rare. Like one of a kind, rare. Go figure. The value of Lu Naya aside, the incident where Blue lost control of emotions and burned down a good portion of Zuki came to mind, but Yugao couldn't believe for the life of her that they were angry at her for any reason. None of that was her fault. It was their fault for letting the attack happen. Putting that away for now, Yugao clicked her blade down into its sheath and nodded her head appreciatively. Thanks. Kabuto glanced at the other woman, a fleeting smile on her face. No problem. Conan now turned around to the other side and Kabuto's right fist closed, saying in a marginally controlled voice. I'm sorry. I don't have any spare shoes on me. I can make do with my sword no problem. I can untangle your chakra for you but that might alert her. She pointed up to Conan's stationary figure. Kakashi's genjutsu was long dispelled but the last bit of his chakra was tangling her chakra control. Are you ready? Kabuto had been ordered to keep Conan occupied for as long as possible, and that feat could only be performed if she had a higher rank kunoichi backing her up. It was deviating from the order to ensure Yugao's safety, but Kabuto wasn't cocky enough to think that she could take on an S-rank ninja by herself. Technically, the figure-hugging bodysuit-wearing medic could keep Yugao safe on the battlefield. Now that was smart. Blue only wanted the paper angel outside Am for a short while. The other members of Akatsuki too, for that matter. Kabuto deliberated, for the shortest of moments, why the love of her life didn't just run over Am. She knew he could, especially now that he was basically all-powerful. He could have teleported them all the way to safety if he wanted. Kabuto shook that thought process out of her head for another time, when they weren't in any imminent danger. Yugao replied affirmatively, and the Snake Sage's apprentice lifted a single finger up close to the other woman's face, holding out a leather belt that had come out of the scroll on her lower back. "Look at my finger and bite this." The swordswoman stared at the finger cross-eyed and bit down hard on the leather belt. Her fingers dug into the ground and she braced herself for whatever was going to happen. All of her attention was on the silver-haired woman's pointer finger. "You're gonna feel a small tug." The fingers of Kabuto's other hands flashed through several one-hand seals underneath Yugao's field of vision. Her hand turned into a fist and she rammed it into Yugao's gut. Boomf! A cloud of smoke escaped from the bush they were cowering in, and Conan's eyes darted down. "There you are." Ooh. 7:26 p.m. Kinshiki Twisted Rock Formation. Northernmost region of Hidden Stone. Sasori of the Red Sands, eternally frozen half-smile, creaked underneath the limbering form of his Hiriko puppet, settling down under an arch-like rock formation and folding his legs under him so that the person safely nestled inside could detach the chakra strings connected to the lower body of his puppet and uselessly pick his ornamental ears. "Huh. Did you say something?" A tick pulsed on Daidara's forehead and he lifted the hem of his, kicking a stray rock and snapping. Have you not been listening to me at all?" "That voice," Hiriko grated, creaking. "It's very easy to tune it out." "I said," Sasori's protective puppet rumbled absent-mindedly, but the Mad Bomber continued in a louder voice. "I said that one of my old Explosion Corp buddies said that Wing Senpai went on a vacation to hidden saltwater before they got a distress call." "What is even with you and this girl?" "She's my senpai, Daidara suddenly yelled, defensive. His cheeks a blazing shade of red and his hand-mouths clenching their teeth inside his fisted hands. "Now shut the hell up, Sasori was visibly taken aback by the newest Akatsuki inductee's exclamation, even unconsciously making Hiriko lean back and, within, lifting his hands up in surrender. "Okay, fine. I'll keep quiet." The silence after his statement was so turgid. Daidara fiddled with the ends of his sleeves, twisting and gnawing at the Akatsuki robe in his hand-mouths, and Sasori twiddled his thumbs, awkwardly pursing his wooden lips and having Hiriko maintain eye contact with the bashful newcomer. He couldn't hold it in any more. "So, Wing Senpai, huh? I said shut it." Daidara grumbled, sliding down the smooth rock face and sitting with his knees to his chin, arms wrapped around his legs. "Just, shut it." Sasori found an intrigued smirk tug at the immovable corners of his wooden face, and Hiriko rumbled. "Who exactly is she?" "My senpai." The blonde bomber repeated in a muffled tone, recalling the image of a dark-skinned, dreadlock-wearing Tokubutsu Junin. "She introduced me to the Explosion Corp and taught me everything I know." Hiriko raised a single finger. "I think. I'm not asking you to think, Sasori Dana. Coming from the person that says, art is an explosion." Sasori's face couldn't get any blanker. "Oh, and you think, art is immortal, or some shit?" The ear-missing ninja snorted not so discreetly. "Bah. Immortal like a plastic bottle of cat piss, ha. We're getting off track." The puppet master waved off Daidara's laughter, not bothering to correct him that imperishable products containing animal urine wasn't art. "Not in the least. You're obviously feeling some form of sexual attraction to this, Wing Senpai." "Sasori Dana," Daidara screamed, shooting up from the ground and futilely shoving the hulking puppet form. "You shut your filthy mouth. You're here." One of Hiriko's hands shoved the Mad Bomber away, hiding the pleasant amusement of the sooner-missing ninja held inside. "I'm only saying that it's not good for your career in Akatsuki if you continue keeping active ties with your former home. You did try to assassinate the Chushikage after all. Bonds like that are dangerous for wanted shinobi like us. They're not active ties or anything, Just memories. And my career in Akatsuki is some bullshit you came up with to rope me up with your sad excuse for living. Excuse me. This time it was the normally cool-headed puppet master that became offended, almost even rising up from the ground under the arching rock formation. Daidara smirked and shrugged. You're excused. The starless, moonless night bore down on the silence of the rock formation, cut by Sasori hotly asking. What do you mean by that? The Iwa-missing ninja fearlessly replied, giving his back to the irate and surprisingly defensive puppet master. I mean that you've got no friends, Sasori Dana, and I find that very sad. I have friends. Contacts don't count. They're scared of you. It wasn't even 2 months after Daidara's induction into the ranks of Akatsuki that he was partnered up with the lone wolf that was Sasori of the Red Sands, and he had observed that every person the man met up with was deathly afraid of him. He also noticed, not an hour ago, how the man seethed as he watched from afar how Daidara playfully jabbed with one of his former friends in Explosion Corp. The blonde smirked widely, teasingly, and he whipped back around and sauntered up to the giant puppet shell, tapping his thin fingers on Hiroko's chest. I can be your friend if you want. My art is my friend. Those are the saddest words I've ever heard in my life. The younger male returned with a playful half smile. Sad old Sasori Dana. I feel sorry for you. HN. Was the only grousing reply from the unmoving puppet shell. Really. I pity how lonely you are. He drew light circles on Hiroko's chest. A wiggling grin fought not to stretch madly across his face. Everyone's so scared of you, except me. He pushed Daidara away and the mad bomber cackled, lacing his fingers behind him and allowing his face to break out in a massive grin. Let's go and find your wing senpai. I'll turn her into art and then we can all be friends. He loomed over the bomb maker ominously, the joints of his Hiroko puppet groaning eerily and his straw hat washed his face with shadows. How does that sound, Daidara? Yeah, my offer's still on the table, lonely ol' Sasori Dana. A crow landed atop the arching rock formation the two S-ranks were standing beneath, turning a single beady black eye down at the unaware pair as they prepared to leave the popular tourist hotspot in Hidden Stone. It all happened so quickly. Two thunk. Daidara's eyes dimmed and he slumped forward into Sasori's puppet shell, and the puppet master instinctively caught his partner. The sooner missing ninja's eyes bugged out when the mad bomber coughed out blood onto him, murmuring in a raspy, dazed voice. Who the, wah? The blonde's eyelids lowered further and blood rushed from his mouth. His legs gave out and Sasori's puppet body easily supported his weight. Daidara's head fell forward with a small bump onto Hiroko's wooden chest and that was when Sasori saw it. A pair of light blue senbon. One stabbed into the nape of Daidara's neck and the other deeply impaled into the base of his skull, freely oozing the life-sustaining red liquid Sasori had long since abandoned. Hiroko's gaze flicked up, carrying Daidara's dead body in his arms without difficulty and searching for the assailant that had taken out his fellow S-rank so swiftly. So undetectably. There was no expulsion of chakra and scarcely a sound aside from the wet noise of it meeting its destination in two of Daidara's vital spots. 781 kilometers away, Blue hummed and tightened his red-gloved hand around Crystalline's grip. He was lying down on a closed bakery at the outskirts of Hanbai City, trusting that the sharp, heavy thud of his long-range weapon after each squeeze of the trigger was too quick to be noticed. He looked into the scope of his sniper rifle only by pure instinct and instead he saw nothing through his bandages, or his blind eyes for that matter. The crow at Hidden Stone wordlessly watched as Sasori warily crept around the twisting rock formations with Daidara's corpse in his arms, and the master of crows saw through the crow's eyes, expanding his own sensory abilities through the crow and conjuring a mental image of Sasori's wooden constitution, not the puppet shell but the puppet master inside. The blind man perceived the map of chakra that sprang from a cylindrical container in his chest, trickling chakra outwards to the rest of his body and providing him the ability to manifest chakra strings. His complicated brain ran over a number of calculations: wind speed, wind direction, distance, weight and length of his senbon, curvature of the earth, thickness of Hiroko's body and, of course, Sasori's crouched retreating maneuvers, already figuring out where the attack that had killed his partner had come from. Blue didn't even need a Sharingan to make the next few shots. Killing Daidara was almost as easy, he thought as he used the last 4 darts in his cartridge. Chew 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 chew. The bullets clanged against rocks, ricocheting and rebounding in an intricate blur, until 2 of the needles found themselves in the primary joints of Sasori's shoulders, another impaled his right eye, and the last blasted the puppet's straw hat off his head and nailed it solidly into the rock behind him. Sush. Pee-pop. Sasori became alarmed at the hissing sound and the soft popping noises coming from his protective Hirako puppet, and when he peered down with his one good eye at his dead partner, he saw that Deidara's brain was leaking thinly out of his ears and nose, and his eyes had burst not unlike two deflated balloons. The blonde skull softened and began caving in, drooping lifelessly in Hirako's arms and wilting with each second. Then there was a tremendous groan from the joints of Hirako's arms and they summarily fell, dropping Deidara too onto the rocky ground with a heavy crash. The puppet master winced as a drop of acid landed on his shoulder, searing into his Akatsuki robes and impatiently eating away at his arm. He looked about the darkened interior of his puppet and noticed that the greenish ooze leaking from the senbon had eaten away at the shell's body, throwing in light from the outside from places where light was never meant to pass. The sniper wanted him to vacate Hirako. He didn't have the option of staying either, as the lumbering puppet was crumbling all around him from the mysterious green acid. Sasori flinched again and pulled at a string from his ring finger, popping open the back emergency exit of his Hirako puppet. He rolled backwards and landed in a crouch, sweeping his eyes around and dashing to Deidara's corpse. I will analyze the acid in my workshop and report this to Lord Payne, he decided, hefting the lifeless blonde bomber onto his shoulder, and Blue popped out the empty cartridge, formerly filled with his hollowed-out needles that were primarily used to contain lethal toxins, poisons and acids. He clicked a new cartridge of 6 senbon into crystalline and the needle at the top chambered itself in the semi-automatic weapon due to a spring loaded inside the senbon casing. This new casing contained his normal darts, the ones he used to bring down targets in a straightforward manner. The blind man started a fresh spiral of calculations. He pulled the trigger only once. Sasori's fate was sealed. Crack. Thump. The redhead was flung back as the dart nailed his chakra core, unintentionally releasing Deidara from his arms and knocking against Hirako's eroding form. The large shell moaned deeply and fell onto its master in a clutter of wood and iron limbs, seeping the acid ruining its body onto the sooner missing ninja. Sasori of the Red Sands was long dead before his back hit the ground. He didn't feel the sensation of his wooden and metallic body being gradually worn down. Back in Fire Country, Naruto flexed his fingers and muttered to himself. Now, where are you, Kakazu? His ears twitched and he beamed, getting up and lying back down, this time facing the general direction of Wind Country. Money isn't everything. Blue scoffed under his breath, fingering the trigger of his long-range weapon. I should know, I had a little. His sarcasm was lost on Yugito-ni as she silently watched her crush, nervous to speak else break his concentration. Ooh. Relocated Kamizawa Settlement. Wind Country Bounty Collection Station. The cache isn't complete. Kakazu droned, throwing the scroll of rue notes back to a greasy-haired man, who fumbled with it and dabbed his brow with a dingy rag. 1 million rue is missing. But, Mr. Kakazu, sir. You hired me to kill your brother, and I did. The green-eyed hunter ninja narrowed his eyes and stood around the other side of a table of the bounty collection station, refusing to sit down. He balefully eyed Obito, dissuading the man from pleading on the client's behalf in that disgustingly, irritably fake jovial attitude of his. We are agreed on 5 million rue, Mr. Kakazu, sir. The dirty-haired merchant begged. He had hired Kakazu alone to kill his brother in order to claim their father's fortune. A simple case of sibling rivalry turned murderous, and over an inheritance no less. This sleazy, reedy, nasally man would have been more outgoing and forward if he was swindling the hard-earned money from a customer, but his bravery fled him at the presence of the infamously effective bounty hunter. The bounty collection station they were in was a newly relocated settlement, where the old one had been swept up by a powerful sandstorm, and professionals at predicting the weather forecasted that the high winds would only get worse over time. The Kamizawa people, a splinter clan of the Kazekage clan, packed up the properties and gathered what family they had left and relocated to a safer area in the desert, where the sandstorm would not reach them. Wind Country's miserly daimyo had not spared a single dime to aid the valuable town in their plight, only explicitly saying that they were to not step a foot outside of Wind Country or show any sign of defecting to other countries. Though, shockingly enough, the Yondaime Kazekage had sent some of his ninjas to the Splinter clan to provide them protection as they moved. A past Wind daimyo made the Kamizawa settlement into an important trading post in Wind Country out of contempt for the then Nadaime Kazekage, and this further widened the rift between original clan and Splinter clan, though not enough to tear their familial ties. There was bad blood between the Kazekage clan and the Kamizawa clan, but at the end of the day they still shared an ancestry, and thus were still family. Sabaku no Rasa was a hard-faced, stone-hearted and cold human being, and in spite of the failure of his own family, of which was primarily his fault, kinfolk was important in Suna because in the beginning it was all and everything they had. As of now, the bounty collection station was nothing more than 4 tall sticks and a tarp, nothing to protect the occupants from the elements. The houses of the Kamizawa people were primarily tents. The frigid late-night wind blew, lightly spraying sand on the sparsely populated unit. The merchant mopped the sweat on his forehead again, blubbering fearfully. FF 5 million Ru. The agreement we reached explicitly said so. His wife got involved, and I killed her. Kakuzu said coldly, recalling without that the woman had screamed at him with a kitchen knife, and he had turned the blade on her, plunging it into her heart and watching blandly as she gurgled on her own blood. The memory didn't conjure pleasant feelings, nor did it make him sad. A job was a job and money was money. The heartless merchant perspired, more so that he had now lost out on his opportunity to claim ownership of everything his brother had, including but not limited to his sister-in-law. Now the woman was dead and Kakuzu continued. Then his kids got involved as well. The merchant didn't need to hear what Kakuzu had done to his nieces and nephews. I'm a nice person, Shinichi. I'm only adding an extra 1 million for my troubles. I never asked. Kakuzu senpai. Go easy on him, eh? I'm not going to listen to some brat that got his ass handed to him on a silver platter by a schoolteacher. A retired kunoichi for that matter. Kakuzu hissed with disdain, eliciting a tick on Obito's brow that broke out of his nice facade. Now, sit there and stay quiet, like a good little bitch. He swiveled his attention to the merchant again, catching the man by his neck and snarling under his voice. Where's my money? Obito wished he had his Sharingan activated. A needle whizzed past his mask, mere inches from his eyehole, and ended its path in the side of Kakuzu's head with a chilling crunch. The man's Jiongu couldn't save him from the acid ebbing out of the dart in his brain, and the force of the hit toppled him onto his side, cracking his neck into the edge of a makeshift table and landing on the floor, his neck broken and his brain liquefied. The merchant turned tail and ran, making sure to snag his money before he did, and the people under the tarp similarly fled for their lives. Obito flipped the table and took cover behind it, his 3 Tomo Sharingan whirling frantically. His eye went to Kakuzu's unmoving body, not believing that the man was truly dead but forced to face reality when the Jiongu in the bounty hunter's body wasn't reacting in any way. Kakuzu's eyes were open and the jade eyes dulled little by little as more brain matter escaped his ears and nose, staring lifelessly at his assigned partner and unable to move as his soul descended into the blistering flames of hell. His soul was welcomed by a terrifying demonic bellow and the skeletal fingers of the grasping dead, pulling him into the realm of damnation. Back in the land of the living, the orange-masked man looked at the projectile that had ended the green-eyed man's life and he cursed when he immediately recognized the light blue needle embedded in the side of Kakuzu's temple. Naruto. The man vanished in a whirlpool, following the path the Senbon had taken in spurts of Kamui and tracing the widely trail of chakra Naruto had purposefully left to help his clan mate better know where he was going. The swirly masked Uchiha found himself in Fire Country 30 minutes later of sporadic teleportation, blazing under the cover of trees in that same widely curving line and came upon the vacant roof of a closed bakery in Hanbai City, except for a solitary note weighted down on a rock. The handwriting wasn't Naruto's. Seikatu clan. The inconvenience of going all the way back to Wind Country in order to find Blue deserted him. He could use Kamui after all. The issue was finding Wind Country's largest nomadic clan in all of Wind Country's vast desert. Naruto had sent him a message, intentionally passing the needle before his face and landing it in Kakuzu's unguarded head, and it was clearly received. Obito wasn't scared of the blue Uchiha. Even though he should be. 7:28 p.m. With Yugao and Kabuto. A deafening explosion went off beside Kabuto and the airborne Iwa-born girl was knocked away, tumbling on her side and slamming into the wall of the dungeon building. Shaking off her concussion and kicking off the building, gritting her bloodied teeth and spinning a pair of chakra scalpels in her palms. The bodysuit-wearing woman lifted her forearms to cover her face as a volley of skin-shredding paper blasted into her, tearing through the surging pieces of paper in a glorious display of blood and gore, closing the distance between a mystified and horrified Conan. The medic's regeneration healed her wounds as the paper tore her skin open, threading flesh and muscle into place over and over again until she made it to the older Kunoichi, engaging her in a short hand-to-hand fight. Kabuto sliced the scalpel in her left hand at Conan's shoulder, baring her teeth as the wound and the shoulder itself billowed out paper, ducking a backhand to her face and digging her right scalpel into Conan's lower rib, yanking her arm out as she encountered the same result but not fast enough to avoid a brain-jostling switch kick, taking her clear off the ground and momentarily knocking her out mid-flight. 17 straight minutes of fighting and the pair hadn't even been able to land a good tear on Conan's Akatsuki robe, while the S-rank had roughed up the two in ways reminiscent of the beatings they collected in their childhood, all in the name of training. The purple-haired lady from Am tilted her head to the side, expressionlessly spectating as Kabuto's limp form arced in the air and then pointing her palm at her, retracting her arm before it could be cut from the elbow. Yugao banged down a jab for her forehead with her sheath, clenched in her other hand, stepped away straight kick to her gut and backtracked from a wailing torrent of paper shuriken that rained down from the heavens, hopping and skipping backwards on her bare feet. Her blade blazed as she tore apart any paper star that got too close for comfort. The younger purple-haired woman spun around a tree and vanished, reappearing on Conan's left side in a crouched position with the tip of her blade extended upwards to Conan's throat, though the woman's feet no longer touched the forest floor, levitating just over the treacherous weapon on two papery wings that flapped majestically. Fascinating child, Conan said airily, dispersing. Her white, papery form curved down and swept the younger ninja, reforming as the origami angel and embracing Yugao, holding the swordswoman's head to her womanly chest and attaching pieces of paper on her body in the process of flying back to the dungeon, starting from the hand grasping her pinkish-white sword and rising up to her neck. You are low on chakra. You must rest. The suppression seals began taking effect and Yugao's eyes flickered with sleep, flailing lethargically in Conan's warm embrace. Let go of me, weirdo. She unintentionally released hold of her sheath, though with the last of her wherewithal she switched Lunaya into a reverse grip, blasting chakra down and getting a response from the non-sentient weapon. The seals burnt off her body and Yugao leaned back in Conan's deceptively loving hug, coming back with a brazen headbutt into the angel's chin. Crack. Ah. The older woman released hold of the cat lover. Both dropped onto the ground and Conan retreated a few steps, holding her mouth. Feisty. She blandly looked at her, blinking once at the spattering drops of blood on her palm and the small cut on her bottom lip she had sustained from the headbutt didn't feel so good either, remarking. This is the first time I've been injured in some time. I get it, you're old. Yugao barked, using her eyes to casually look for her fallen sheath. When she didn't find it, and realizing that Conan was right in her having not much chakra left, Yugao's fingers slipped into a pocket on her unzipped flak jacket and pulling out a pill between her index and middle finger, the second of 2 chakra pills Kabuto had given her to hasten the process of restoring the flow of her chakra. Warily watching Conan as the older woman patiently waited for her to take the pill, Yugao called. Kabuto, you still alive? A dry cough came from somewhere in the forest, followed closely by a chilling click as the medic jerked her dislocated jaw back into place. Oh, the benefits of an unhingeable jaw. Gimme a second. Ignoring the other woman's call for a reprieve from the battle, Yugao asked. What are we doing? Are we running or are we killing this lady? How about? Kabuto replied slowly, rolling her tongue and suppressing her presence, throwing her voice to confuse Conan on her true location. We try that killing thing. If it doesn't work, we run. I'm not sure how much longer I can do this. The X-Leaf Junin grated, holding Lunaya in a reverse grip in her left hand and the chakra pill in her right. Conan scoffed. Ugh. Yugao darted to her right and the paper user's fist wafted past her face, clipping the very edge of her ear and slamming into the wall of the dungeon, obliterating that entire side of the building and cutting the tip of Yugao's ear as a tidal wave of sharp paper rushed a millisecond after their controller's speedy attack. The younger purple-haired woman tucked into a sideways roll, stumbling into a run as bombs went off behind her and the calm and missing ninja stood in the middle of it. Boom. Boom. Bo 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 boom. Bee bee boom boom. The heat lapped at Yugao's heels and the shockwaves leveled what was left of the abandoned dungeon. She bit down on the chakra pill and prayed, firing her briefly restored chakra into her Hoshi meteorite sword and deciding to use her strongest kenjutsu attack. She made a big jump ahead of the fire and earthquake, flipped around smoothly and skidding back on her bare feet a little. The swordswoman held Lunaya to her right, pointed up to the dark sky and supporting her right shoulder with her left hand. The white cutting edge of her buzzed with life and the engraved full moon close to the tip of the blade burned black. At the same time Conan shot out of the flames, running with her arms flying behind her and her Akatsuki robes harmlessly billowing in the clamor of her bombs. Yugao cut her blade down, zipping her arms around and forming a visible cube in the air, drawn by black lines. Astral Kenjutsu, 8th phase of the moon, apocalypse of the rabbit goddess. She gripped her sword with both hands and stabbed the cube. A beam of pearly white moonlight exploded out of the cube in a straight line, tearing through the right side of Conan's torso. The moonlight then blazed up into the sky and stopped before it could leave Earth's atmosphere. Yugao pushed harder, hilting her blade in the cube, and Conan's body warped into the beam of light, violently sucked in and sent into the sky. Kabuto's jaw fell, more or less literally, when a moon formed high in the sky. A Kami damned moon. The new celestial body was smaller than the real moon and seemed to look translucent against the night sky. The whole world stopped and looked up into the sky in horror, as the night had formerly been devoid of lunar light but was now being illuminated by a small heavenly body that eerily resembled a piece of circular paper in the sky. The tides rose in reaction, the Earth fought against the foreign orbit of the chakra-made moon and this resulted in earthquakes on the other side of the planet. A single line of blood slid down Yugao's nose. Dark light spilled from the area on the astral cube the former Konoha Anbu was piercing, coiling down the length of the handle and wrapping itself around her hands. Rush! The swordswoman roared, yanking Lunaya out of the astral cube and the artificial moon was propelled into space like it was being magnetized into the oblivion. The thing people didn't know and wouldn't see was that the moon was being attracted to a planet millions of light years away, the origin of Hoshigaku's fallen star. The fate of the origami angel was unknown. The astral cube popped and Yugao's sword fell from her hands, collapsing onto her knees and panting raggedly. I can't feel my hands. Yugao panicked, trying and failing to wiggle her fingers. Kabuto caught her master's friend before she fell to the ground, wisely not touching Lunaya as of yet. Kabuto, my hands I can't. Her hands were coal black and Kabuto laid them on her abdomen. Yugao, I've got you. The silver-haired medic replied gently, lowering Yugao into a prone position and flipping her fingers through a number of hand seals. She reassured Blue's best friend once more. You'll be fine, I've got you. Ooh. 7:40 p.m. Current camp of the Seikatu clan. Obito didn't want to know who had been inside the moon, forcing himself to approach the campfire-lit campsite of the nomadic clan. There was a large bonfire in the middle of the temporary settlement, maintained by a steady disposal of kindle and wood by some traditionally dressed youth for the purpose of warming their whole clan, even as there were smaller fires within each household and outside of tents, smaller enclaves for bachelors and bachelorettes of the clan. The clan might have been nomadic in nature but they were quick builders, assembling and disassembling humble abodes and tents efficiently, packing them up for the next trip around the desert. The largest residence was the chief's and it was a wonderfully artistic mishmash of wood, steel and cloth, patched with warm colors and vaulted so that it could comfortably accommodate more than half of the whole clan. The Seikatu clan were a colorful people, traditionally, seeing as they wore thick clothing that were designed with bright colors and patterns during the day, the intricate and more detailed patterns normally assigned to the chief's family while a simpler but no less artistic patterning was for the general populace of the clan. The men wore white turbans and the women had red-colored layers of clothes that covered their heads, and most of their hair in the process. The customary clothes worn by the clan, children more or less included. When they were not tending to their herd of goats and sheep or going on diplomatic trips to Sunagaku were thick, multi-layered, long-sleeved kimonos that reached their lower calves, baggy pants or shorts, white sandals and their head coverings, albeit the rules for head coverings differed and eased up little by little after the succession of the subsequent generation, like how unmarried women weren't allowed to show their faces some 200 years ago and unfaithful men to their spouses were banned from showing their own faces for the rest of their lives. Now, as the sun had set and the cold desert winds howled unforgivingly, the bonfire blazed merrily and the people, wearing darker tinted, carefully patterned clothes, were assembled around the flames and sharing supper as a community. The people weren't too close to the fire, nestled a safe distance away and surrounding it, seated on carpets and mats and digging into their dinner and downing sweetened or unsweetened goat milk with it, or water for a few others. Noticeably, the chief and his wife were absent from the clan dinner. The kindly ebbing chatter coming from around the bonfire was not deterred by this, eating their food and enjoying the company of their family as well as visitors from Sunagaku. Past and present Kazekage always made it a priority to maintain a good relationship with the Sekitu clan, as the clan of nomads had been walking the desert longer than Wind Country was even a country at all, so intertraveling and visitations were encouraged on both sides. The orange-masked Uchiha cautiously blinked his Sharingan into life, flickering his eyes from one corner of the clan. He was almost tricked into thinking that the Sekitu people were defenseless, allowed into the clan with less resistance than the time he infiltrated Omegakure, and that was saying something. Obito frowned, eyeing a tall man that had a poleaxe in his right hand, donning the traditional clothes of his people. One other thing he had on was a fanny pack wrapped around the front of his kimono. The Sekitu guard had a series of slash-like cuts across his cheeks and neck and bright yellow eyes, burning in his sockets like the desert landscape during the day. The man grunted and stopped before Obito, towering over the Uchiha. The swirly masked man looked up at him, not intimidated, and he crossed his arms. "Where is Naruto?" he asked in a tight voice, trying to keep his temper at bay. "You mean Blue, right?" The man replied with his own question, sounding not like a behemoth but like an everyday man. He scratched his scarred cheek. "You know, I've always known him as Blue." A corner of his lips twisted down, regarding the impatient Uchiha with a raised eyebrow. "You must be Obito." "I am. Follow me." He led the suddenly not so talkative Uchiha around the bonfire and the people feasting around it, stopping before the chief's residence and sweeping open the tent flaps at the front of the assembled building. "He also wanted me to give you this." The poleaxe-wielding guard stabbed the end of his weapon into the sand and fumbled in his fanny pack, presenting 3 rings for Obito. "He didn't want me to polish 'em up or anything, just to give it to you as he gave me." The Uchiha's eyes bugged out at the blood-stained Akatsuki rings. Kakazu's own was there too. His lone Sharingan positively identified Sasori and Deidara's. "You okay, buddy?" Obito very nearly set Amaterasu over the clan. He shoved past the guard, ignoring the tall man's offended calls. He entered and his quick eyes took in everything in the room. There was a much smaller fire burning in the middle of the chief's hall, burning an odd shade of red. The opposite end of the hall were 2 thrones carved out of a white tree and decorated with the colorful clothes of the Sekitu clan. Seated on them was a couple wearing the dark knightly kimonos of the Desert Clan. The man had a white turban and the woman had her hair covered, as well as her chin and her neck. The man was of average build, somehow still making it look and felt like he held the power in that whole region of the desert, and the woman was on her throne though the fingers of her right hand were laced through his as her and her husband's eyes were not focused on Obito but rather on someone not seated on the platform but on an unassuming wooden stool. The chief and his wife had sweet smiles on their faces as they watched the visitor play with their child. Blue bounced a 1-year-old baby on his knee, cooing. "You're a big boy, aren't you?" He lifted the boy up a little, barely throwing him up and hardly releasing the baby from his hold. He brought the child back onto his knee and began bouncing him again, relishing in the baby's giggling. "You're just a bundle of joy, aren't you? Huh." He tickled the baby's belly, the corners of his eyes turned up. "Aren't you?" The sniper wasn't wearing bandages around his eyes but a pair of pitch black, circular glasses. He didn't want to freak out his old friends with his blindness. His sensory abilities acted as detailed feelers in place of his vision and that was how he saw, though that explanation was severely lacking. He also didn't have his cloak on him, coming in his dark clothes and red gloves, though the bandages around his sandaled feet remained. "He has your eyebrows, Tanjiro," Blue commented and the man narrowed his eyes, more so when his wife titted into her other hand and Naruto's lips stretched into a larger-than-life grin. "Hilarious," was the chief's po-faced reply. The thick-browed man then smirked. "I see you've not yet been introduced to a comb." Naruto shrugged, wiggling his fingers in front of the baby's face. "Combs don't do it for me, so I don't bother." Chief Tanjiro of the Sekitu clan sat up and his wife facepalmed, anticipating her husband's next words. "My wife cuts my hair. PFF. Would you like to cut his hair, Cupcake?" The man blushingly looked at his wife and the woman silently gushed at her adorable husband, leaning forward and planting a soft kiss on his lips. The loving atmosphere was broken by Blue's mocking snort. "PFF, Cupcake." The woman from Suna huffed. It would make him more tolerable to look at. A sweet drop grew on the side of Blue's temple. Ouch. He knew she didn't mean anything hateful by it, proven by the light-hearted snigger from the chief's wife. The chief smirked proudly at his wife's biting return, saying, "You might even find your second half, Blue." Love and soulmates don't do it for me either. Here. The woman smiled sadly. What about that girl you're always talking about? Kushina. The dark-clothed man hummed tonelessly, tickling the baby's stomach. When you used to travel with us. Blue then grunted and almost toppled forward when a small weight pounced onto his back, clambering up and gripping his black blonde hair in their small hands. Hey, not the hair. Maya, the sooner-born mother called, reprimanding the child with a stern shout. Get down from there and stop bothering your uncle. Horsey. The girl named Maya squealed, tugging Blue's unruly hair and making the man playfully neigh as he rose up from his stool, making sure to hold the baby out and spin around on the carpet spread out over the interior of the hall. The 1-year-old boy and the 4-year-old girl giggled in their enjoyment. 2 more weights leaped on Blue, wrapping their arms around his legs and laughing as the man stomped on the ground, doing so not strong enough to shake him off but gently enough for the parents to not worry for their children. The 5-year-old twins, both boys, hooted and Naruto laughed. The blue Uchiha chuckled good-naturedly and rose up from his stool. Obito stood there, stunned. It took a special kind of person to go from murdering 3S ranks to playing with children. Having a heartfelt moment with old friends. A vein throbbed on his temple and Obito yelled. Hey. Blue froze, his glasses lopsided from the childish horseplay. He had the audacity to look surprised at his appearance. Holding the baby close to himself, he waved. Yo, Obito, how's it going? The orange-masked Uchiha angrily pointed at his clanmate, stalking to him in heavy steps. Who the fuck do you think you are? Blue Winston bent down, lowering the apprehensive girl from his back and passing the baby in his arms to her. Come on man, there are kids here. He ruffled the twins' lime green hair and ushered them away with a whisper. He smiled kindly and winked to calm them down from the one-eyed man's enraged approach. Go to your mother, kids. The children scurried away and the woman welcomed them with a worried hug, encouraging them behind the throne. The chief got up from his throne and glowered at Obito, but Blue motioned for everyone to calm down. Let's just relax, okay? We've all had a long day. What's stopping me from burning this whole damned place to the ground, Naruto? Exclamation mark quote. Obito shouted, coming up on Blue and fearlessly shoving the underworld back, something that made Blue chuckle good-naturedly and wave his hand over his shoulder for the gradually infuriated chief to cool down. The Seikatu man helped his wife and children leave while he stayed, for their safety. The woman reluctantly did. You killed 3 of my Akatsuki. Do you know how hard it was for me to convince them to join? He walked up to Blue again and pushed him, roaring. Do you blame the Amekage? He should have stayed out of my business. Blue coolly replied, holding up his hands as if to surrender. As if saying that it was all inevitable. This only made Obito madder. His eye evolved into the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan and Blue pushed his black glasses up his nose, furrowing his brow. I assumed you wanted a positive ID on those your work buddies. Obito spoke in a low growl, his orange, spirally mask not showing his festering expression any justice. I've been patient for so many years, Naruto. The shit you pulled reversed decades of planning. Blue shrugged, his own expression was lopsided and unconcerned. Aren't you wondering why you're still alive? There was an audible crack as the masked Uchiha clenched his fists. Blue took that as his cue to respond. I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt, Obito. We share the same heritage. The same bloodline. Most important of all, you aren't a blood traitor like my sister. The blue Uchiha took a step closer, lowering his voice. I'm even willing to forget that you attacked Kushina to get back on Kakashi. Shadows crept up Blue's face and he gave his clanmate a twisted smirk. See, I've already forgotten. The Master of Crows placed a firm hand on Obito's shoulder and the weight of that single limb was akin to the whole world landing on his body, making his legs shake under the crushing heaviness. Even though the 2 Uchiha men were basically the same height, Blue loomed over Obito and his malevolent smirk lifted higher as the tone of his voice dropped lower. Already, forgotten. The hand on his shoulder dropped and Obito fell onto one knee, gasping for air. Kakashi doesn't love Konoha, he loves his teacher. Minato. Blue corrected Obito's way of thinking, continuing. Raising down Konoha to cinders wouldn't affect him at all. You might have noticed that he killed you just for your eyes simply because he thought Minato would look at him more favorably. Naruto's shoulders lifted and dropped nonchalantly. And he was right, I guess. Obito got up, uneasily taking a step back. Blue laughed at that, saying, Kakashi's more than Minato's favorite student. The guy's Minato's lapdog. Literally. What of Rin? She didn't have to die. The one-eyed Uchiha could easily forgive Rin for not immediately reporting Kakashi's crime, clearing the fabricated story of his death and bringing the Hatake to justice, but watching Kakashi plunge a Chidori in her chest broke him. Worsening the wound, Kakashi had once again created a false story of Rin being kidnapped by Kiri Shinobi and having the Sanbi sealed into her. A tear fell from Obito's eye and his shoulders fell. She didn't. Blue's face saddened and he placed a hand on Obito's shoulder. This time the gesture didn't pulse with killer intent, rather it was a comforting gesture and Obito took off his orange mask, showing his scarred face and the slow stream of tears coming from his eyes. The one-eyed man's Sharingan spun to a stop, deactivating. It wasn't only that his efforts in building and fortifying Akatsuki had been set ablaze but that his beliefs had been debunked, the sole drive that pushed him to want to let the Kyuubi loose on Konoha, the village that had so easily believed the Hatake's fabrications. Obito might have been from the same clan as Blue but they weren't particularly close. Yes, they saw each other in the clan compound and waved, and the one-eyed Uchiha had even been present with the rest of the clan to send the young Blue Uchiha off into the war, though that was the end of their association. He hadn't even been in the clan or technically alive when Blue had shown his dominance and the Uchiha clan bowed their heads to his power. He did know that Naruto was smart. A genius for that matter. Konoha's geniuses had a track record of scarcely getting anything wrong, intellectually and analytically. I want you to walk away from Akatsuki. The one-eyed Uchiha exhaled, letting go of his mask. It fell on the carpeted floor with a low thump, replying. There's no Akatsuki left, is there? Instead of giving him a straight answer, Naruto said. I also want us to make a deal. The other man didn't answer, mutely looking up at the more powerful Uchiha with depressed eyes. Right now, Kakashi is in Zuki Town. Injured and in the custody of the Iron Yakuza's medics. This seemed to pique Obito's interest, as the man stood up straighter and the hand on his shoulder was shrugged off. Blue half smiled. I want you to kill him. How you do it is up to you. When you're done, put it somewhere Minato can find it, somewhere private. Murdering Kakashi was the single point of Obito's quest for vengeance, though he refrained from agreeing right off the bat as he recalled that this was an offer, not a request. In exchange for the trouble, I'll bring Rin back for you. He waved his hand casually as his clanmate stumbled back in shock as there was a black pop of feathery chakra burst on his left shoulder. A crow materialized from there and perched on its master's shoulder, nesting happily and tucking its wings. The crow had the same featureless coal-black orbs as the rest his summoned sons, the souls he directly brings back from the punishing underworlds, as it had two purple markings under its eyes. The bird turned its head to the side, peering at a mortified Obito with its right eye, and the bird's features softened with mourning and regret as it saw him. The crow hid its head behind its wing, no longer able to look at the teammate she had betrayed several years ago by not telling Konoha the truth of his death, all to protect a crush that never acknowledged her existence. Blue tapped his chin pensively, seeming to forget that Obito was a person, that the concept of reincarnation or resurrection wasn't so instantaneous like it had been displayed not 10 seconds ago. And don't worry about her memories of the afterlife, I'll erase them from her head, and to sweeten the deal, I'll also seal away her recollection of her murder. Still though, I can't take everything away or it'll fracture her soul. He stroked Crow Rin's feathered head with his pointer finger. Healing those unseen scars is up to you. Whether or not you two get together is another thing entirely. The words coming out of Naruto's mouth bewildered Obito. Confused and alarmed, Blue saw the horrified amazement of Obito's eye and he rolled his shaded, unseeing eyes. When you've done what I told you to do, bring her body to me here and you two will be reunited for however long your natural lives can squeeze out. Naruto also wanted to add that Rin wouldn't be 14 when he brought her back, as he would increase her age as naturally as he could and her body would grow to accommodate the age up, though he felt like Obito had had enough heart palpitations for one day. He clapped his hands together and rubbed them, a show of eagerness the other Uchiha found curious and distrustful. Crow Rin flapped her wings and dispersed into a small burst of feathers. What do you say? Naruto said, taking off his right hand glove, stretching his right hand to his clanmate and waiting for a handshake in return, patiently holding his hand out. Do we have a deal, Obito? The formerly masked Uchiha looked at the bare, gloveless hand with mounting trepidation, feeling a harsh tug in his gut telling him to run as fast and as far away as possible, to not trust this man, even though Blue shared the same bloodline as him. The corners of Blue's eyes turned up slightly, watching Obito chew his bottom lip in hesitation. Meanwhile, Chief Tanjiro spectated without a word, retaking his throne and reclining into it. Turmoil rolled into the ex-Akatsuki member's head, hearing his instincts blaring for him to not take the deal and flee for dear life. No man was able to bring back the dead. But Rin. He saw her with his own eyes. That was her. He knew her and that was her. It was her, right? Was the hall getting hotter? The temperature around him and Blue climbed ever so unnoticeably, and the offered hand remained there for him, patient. Serene. You'll resurrect Rin. I will bring Rin no Haru back from the dead. Same thing. Right. The one-eyed Uchiha grabbed his head, searching for Blue's loophole and finding the secretive smile invisibly tickling against the corners of the Blue sniper's lips, a cacophonous red flag. Obito. Blue called. His voice sounded like it was coming from the end of a long tunnel, echoing and shattering his thought processes, wiping at the beads of sweat forming on his brow and tugging at his collar at the hike in the room's temperature. Obito glanced around the Blue Uchiha, spotting an intriguingly raised eyebrow from the Seikatu chief, but no sign of discomfort from the rise in temperature. Obito. Naruto echoed again. The offered hand hovered there without wavering. The underworld cocked his head to the side, asking, "Don't you want this? Don't you want to see Rin again?" Yes, I do. Obito stammered uncertainly. She misses you, you know. The Master of Crows remarked, sounding sincerely sorry. Not even the pleasures of the afterlife can comfort her. Blue bobbed his head, closing his milky white eyes. Besides, I'm not asking much in return. Kill Kakashi and send his head to Minato. It's basically what you want to do, right? Alright. Well, for Rin. The other Uchiha's eyes hardened and he took Naruto's hand. Deal. Fire coated their hands and Blue's smile broadened into a wicked grin. Awesome. Obito, out of shock from having the red flames cover their hands, ripped his out of Blue's grip and looked at his hand for burn marks. None. Not even a tingle. The sweltering heat of the chief's hall dropped back down to normal. You have 12 hours to get the job done. Blue voiced, carelessly rolling his wrist, pulling his gloves back on. Or else, consequences. You understand. Walking around the one-eyed Uchiha with his hands behind his head, slinking lazily to the exit, Obito exclaimed. Consequences. You never mentioned consequences. It's not my fault you didn't ask. He debated whether or not to tell the Uchiha that the consequences were deathly if he didn't meet the time and that if Rin returned from the dead, there would also be consequences. Obito hadn't even asked if his clanmate had barred his path to Kakashi. Details matter, Obito. Before you agree to anything, you have to understand exactly what you're agreeing to. He was going to leave the consequences for Obito's imagination. Obito's heart dropped and his soul sunk into the pits of despair, suddenly feeling sick to his stomach. He felt like he had signed a deal with the devil. And, in a way, he was right. He had. I'll be right back. Errands to run, you know. Startled and incredulous that the man that could raise the dead had errands to run, Obito turned around snappily, asking just as Blue opened the tent flap. What errands? A steady grin crawled up Blue's face, flashing a mouthful of serrated teeth, an incomplete demonic visage that sent chills down Obito's spine. His answer was simple, yet the obvious meaning of the words themselves were not. I'm going to kill a god. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.